Celebrations in Syria after the U.S. president announced he is lifting decades of sanctions. Donald Trump says his decision will give the nation a chance at greatness after years of civil war. So, can Syria's new leadership deliver on the hopes of the people and rebuild the country? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Fuli Batibo. Syrians are describing it as a turning point, the second joy since the fall of Assad. US President Donald Trump has announced he will lift all sanctions on Syria as a way to help the country rebuild after years of civil war. The United Nations estimates half of the Syrian population is displaced and nearly 75% needs humanitarian aid. It says at its current rate of growth, Syria will take at least half a century to achieve its pre-war economic level. President Ahmed al-Sharaa has already called on the US to invest in the nation's oil and gas sector. But can he capitalize on the removal of US restrictions and transform the fragmented and devastated country? And what about Syria's fragile security situation? We'll put these questions to our guests in just a moment. First, this report from Imogen Kimber.
Decades of US sanctions on Syria are soon to be over. President Donald Trump made the announcement after meeting Syria's leader Ahmed al-Sharaa in Riyadh on Wednesday during his four-day tour of the Gulf. It's the first such meeting between US and Syrian leaders in 25 years.
We are currently exploring normalizing relations with Syria's new government, as you know. I am also ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria to give them a fresh start. It gives them a chance for greatness. The sanctions were really crippling, very powerful.
Trump says he made the decision after discussions with his friend, Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. The news was met with celebrations in Syria. Sanctions made economic recovery in post-war Syria very difficult, where unemployment and poverty are high and living standards are low.
It will be great for our country. Construction will return. The refugees will return. Everyone will return. The prices will drop. There is good to come.
The US has sanctioned Syria since 1979, but the latest round was imposed in 2011, targeting former President Bashar al-Assad for his human rights abuses during the civil war. They included a freeze on Syrian government assets held abroad, a ban on US investments in Syria, and restrictions on petroleum imports. Since taking power, the new government of President Sharaa has been making efforts to improve ties with countries and increase economic cooperation. This lifting of sanctions is a big step towards this. And the people who lived through a war that killed hundreds of thousands and destroyed great swathes of the country hope it's a step forward too. Imogen Kimber, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Well, let's now bring in our guests for today's show. In Damascus is Sinan Hatahet, who's a non-resident fellow at the Atlantic Council's Syria project. In Belfast, in the US state of Maine, is Joshua Landis, director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. And in Stockholm is Omar Al-Shogri, a Syrian refugee and director for detainee affairs at the Syrian Emergency Task Force. Gentlemen, thank you all for being with us on Inside Story. Thank you for your time. Sinan, in Damascus, let me start with you. We've seen scenes of celebrations in Syria after the announcement by the US president that he was going to lift these sanctions. What are the hopes of the Syrian people, the immediate hopes of the Syrian people, now that these sanctions are going to be lifted?
Well, sanctions have been labeled for a long time in Syria, even before the fall of Bashar al-Assad, as the main reason for the for the economic misery of the Syrian people. Let's just remember that around 90% of the Syrian population are living under the poverty line. So the direct hope is directly linked to the livelihoods of the Syrian workforce, more jobs, cheaper products, and also reconstruction, mainly in the infrastructure, in also making electricity available for households and for industrial parks. These are the main inspirations of the Syrian people once the sanctions are lifted. Now, we also have to be quite cautious in how to manage these expectations, and how long will it actually take time for this sanctions easing or lifting will take it.
Let me ask you about that, Sinan. Is there a united sense of celebration, or is it more fragmented?
The way I've witnessed it is across the board, different from people from different social backgrounds, sectarian backgrounds are all very helpful, even including communities that are really against or engaged into a kind of resistance with the current government, have welcomed the news, even though, of course, they also think that they have maybe lost some leverage in their attempt to negotiate a better deal with Damascus. But the general feeling is a feeling of ease and celebration.
Omar, let me come to you in Stockholm. What does the lifting of these sanctions mean to you and for those Syrians living abroad who are hoping to return home?
Well, firstly, it's a great day for the Syrian people, and it's very understandable that people are celebrating this important moment. The most important needs in Syria today are the food, the water, the electricity, and before that is provided, it's very difficult to think about freedom or democracy in any sense. So this is a step in the right direction. And obviously, because those sanctions were imposed on the former regime that actually killed and bombed its own people, it makes sense to live them today and not keep the same sanctions that existed before. And for us as Syrians who live abroad, who have advocated for imposing sanctions on Assad and been advocating for lifting the current sanctions, and I wanna just reiterate what your guest also mentioned, that we have to manage the expectations. It will take some time to actually lift all the sanctions, even though there may be a will to do that. And the companies and the investments won't be running to Syria immediately, but this is a great step in the right direction. And also this would allow us, on a very, very simple example, I can tell you, this would allow me to send some money to my sister who is in Syria without having to lose half of the value or wait for someone who will be traveling to Syria to do it. Soon we will be able to use the usual transaction services to provide to our people on the ground and to support, and to be able to also fly immediately to Damascus from Europe, instead for having to take a more complicated route.
Right. Let me ask you one question before I come to Joshua. Omar, let me just ask you about something you said. You talked about managing expectations. Many former detainees and survivors are still seeking justice. Do you think this decision affects that? And is there still room for transitional justice in Syria today?
I share some of the frustration that lots of activists and families of victims, especially families of victims of torture and detention, have. There has not been any clear process that been established by the current government to find the truth, because what families are looking for about their beloved ones is the truth, and there's been nothing, no clear process. And hopefully now, when the weight of the sanctions will be lifted soon, there will be more resources and more ability to and time to actually focus on this very important question: what happened to the ones that we didn't find when we freed all the political prisoners? What happened to them? We need to speak to those families, because nobody can move on in their life before they know the real truth. And it's very difficult to come and say the ones who didn't come out die. You can't say that to a family who've been waiting for 12 years and they didn't have any evidence. So this is a very sensitive point that the government has yet been very slowly on. And if they don't address it, they will have issues. The people won't be quiet for a long time.
Okay, Joshua Landis, let me now come to you. Ahmed al-Sharaa had already scored big successes on regional and international levels. Just how significant, though, is this latest breakthrough? Does it mark the moment he finally secures the international legitimacy he's been seeking?
It does. It does. This is a major, major victory for Ahmed al-Sharaa and his government. It's on a scale, diplomatically, it's the equivalent of his victory, his military victory of taking Damascus, because without the lifting of sanctions, his government was doomed. He would not be able to provide the kind of economic restart for Syria that he now has the possibility of doing. It's going to take a long time, and as your other guests have already said, Congress has to agree to this. So the president can't unilaterally raise all these sanctions. But so this is a major victory for him. There is no doubt about it. There are, of course, many Syrians who are worried that this kind of victory will leave them behind, particularly Syria's minorities, the Alawite community, Christians, Kurds, Druze, who are not happy with the new government because it's extremely dictatorial. The president gets to appoint all of Parliament, either directly or indirectly. He gets to appoint the Supreme Court. He's the head of the military. He can call military emergency. So he is in complete control. And, and just yesterday in Latakia, the governor of Latakia, the new governor, went to speak to the Christian churches and with his 12-year-old son and asked them not to wear bikini on the beaches. His 12-year-old son said it was embarrassing for him to go to the beach because he didn't know which way to look. There was too much flesh exposed. And the Christians are very worried by this, but all Syria's minorities that don't follow the same Islamic principles are worried that this government is going to come down on them hard.
Sinan, let me ask you in Syria about this. I mean, Joshua says there that Syria's minorities are worried. Do you share this sentiment? And, some have also argued that Ahmed al-Sharaa's rise to power was through military dominance, not by popular mandate. So what does this legitimacy mean for Syria's future political stability and also its regional integration?
Well, yes, obviously there are some communities in Syria that are concerned with the current government. There have been also cases that violations have been made against them, which fuel further their concerns. However, we also have to move on by trusting other communities that are labeled as a pro-regime or pro-Sharia, mainly the urban Sunnis as well as the rural Sunnis, also to work together with other communities in creating a new national identity. And this is not the work of the government. This is the work of the society. And this is what the Syrian revolution aspires to. And it's a process. It's a process that takes time, that takes also engagement and a lot of trust building and confidence building measures. So I think that the Syrian people share the same concern, maybe in different attitudes and maybe also with less existential threats or feeling of threats from other communities. But it is a common goal across the board. Now, would the lifting of sanctions impede this process? Definitely not. It will help it because by providing work, we are providing also common goals for common spaces, common benefits across the sector and sects. This is where we need to see conscious businessmen from Aleppo, for example, working in Latakia and Jable and employing Alawites and Sunnis and Christian alike. The Syrian society has its responsibility and needs to assume it. To be just in a position of waiting for the government to play this role is going to be counterproductive. It is a country that, yes, is today governed by a military force, but is a military force the strongest among the weak, which is very important to know that it is a
Omar, your thoughts about this? Sinan says, we have to move on to create a new nation. How should civil society organizations prepare to navigate this new phase, especially with fears that this international engagement, that lifting of sanctions may come at the cost of human rights accountability, for example?
Firstly, I think what Sinan said was perfect to the point. And the reconstruction of Syria is a reconstruction not only of the country in terms of buildings, but also the reconstruction of the human being that has been suffering for so many years, and reconstruction of culture and the society that's been destroyed in so many different ways. And the lifting of sanctions, and in this sense, will give people the opportunity to go back to a sense of a normal life. And a normal life, Syrian people are, in general, very good-hearted people, and we always lived together with all different kind of people in our society and so on. We never fought. The Assad regime has created some sort of sectarianism, but today I choose always to speak about the Syrian people as the Syrian people. I don't talk about this sect or this sect. That doesn't matter, because I think those issues we as Syrians will be able to come together, because the main thing that Syrians are looking for today is stability. And if the government or any government, entities move forward to do certain behavior that does not serve stability, I think the people in Damascus and the people in Syria will actually be rising. And that's what I trust the most. The Syrian people who fought for so many years to bring a better life for themselves won't just accept any government because it's the reality of today. People actually will be fighting to have the best possible option. And now the people who are, people like me who are outside, who actually have a good sense or experienced democracy and freedom and the respect for human rights in other lives and in other nations, I think we need to contribute too with our understanding of how we experienced human rights from outside of Syria, how we experience democracy and so on, and to inform about these experiences, see what are things that we can bring to Syria and what are things that do not fit in our society.
All right, gentlemen, let's move the conversation forward a bit and talk about the economic implications of this decision, but also the regional political implications of the decision. Joshua, let me come to you first. President Trump has framed the lifting of these sanctions as a humanitarian gesture, but as we know, American companies, particularly in the oil sector, will also benefit from the opening of Syria, won't they?
Yes, that's the big hope, and President Sharaa has made an offer that the American companies could proceed in rebuilding oil. Syria used to produce about 400,000 barrels a day. Today, it's only producing about 60,000. The entire infrastructure, the wells, the refineries, electricity capacity, all need the investment of billions of dollars from the outside world. And if America can lead the way in the oil industry, that'll be benefit to both countries. It'll be an important lift for all Syrians. Syrians from one end to the other need economic development more than anything else. And if he can deliver that, he will be a hero for many, many Syrians. There's no doubt about it.
Sinan, how can he deliver that, do you think? How can the new Syrian government attract foreign investment while also at the same time building its own credibility?
Well, I think it is not the job of the government only. I think it is where also the business community has to come in, because we are also in a phase of redefining our political economy. We are transitioning from a crony capitalism that has been installed by Bashar al-Assad, in which the last 14 years, thanks to the sanctions, cronies have been even more emboldened and with greater monopolies. So we are transitioning from a destroyed economy, which needs a vision. It needs a grand plan. It needs a new identity. And this is not, again, the job of the government only. It is also the job of the private sector, of the business community. And I think here the Syrian diaspora has also a major role to play, because the Syrian diaspora, whether refugees, during the war or before are extremely active in their local economies, whether in GCC countries or in Europe and the Americas. And they will be the masonry that will build the bridges that connect Syria across the region. But in my opinion, the biggest asset of Syria is its geographical positioning. It is how it can integrate with the region physically in terms of connecting pipelines, in terms of connecting internet backbone, and logistically being part of regional integration. And it's not necessarily in its natural resources.
Right. Your thoughts about this, Omar? Syria's economy minister has described this moment as an economic renaissance. Do you believe that the current regime has the institutional capacity to manage an influx of investment transparently and also equitably?
It seems that they are firstly thinking about, the investment from a political standpoint and security standpoint, where you actually you're trying to have the companies that are coming from the countries that you want to build a good relationship with in order for you to provide yourself with some security and so on. And I think Syria may not have the infrastructure, both and as the people on the line or the institutions to be able to do things as well as one wish. But I think we are building the processes for everything, and it seems like there's a diverse people of people in backgrounds that could contribute to the decent management of the economy in Syria and the potential investment in the future. I will be honest with you, I wouldn't be the best person to answer this question, but I'm very optimistic because Syrians have been displaced for so many times, and so many people have been involved in the current government, and Syrians have business experience from different countries, whether that's the Gulf countries or in Europe and so on. So the Syrian government must capitalize on the Syrian minds that are knowledgeable about what should be done in the future.
Okay, Joshua, let me come to you now and ask you about the regional implications of this decision by US President Donald Trump. If about 6 months ago I was to tell you that the US president would be sitting down with Syria's President Ahmed al-Sharaa on a Middle East tour that didn't include Israel, what would you have said?
I would have said, no way. This comes as a great surprise. And clearly, President Trump has prioritized economic interests over ideological interests, and he has prioritized his relationship and America's relationship with Saudi Arabia and Turkey over Israel's. Israel did not and does not want to have sanctions lifted like this on Syria without many preconditions, because Israel wants to keep Syria weak and divided because it's fearful that al-Sharaa is really an al-Qaeda person and that Turkey is a great danger to Israel. So for President Trump to make this really very dramatic decision is clearly turning a big page for Syria and in the region. And in a way, he's cutting his administration loose from some of the interests of Israel, a step that he is just beginning to take, and that'll make a big difference to the country and to the region.
Sinan, your thoughts about this, looking at the regional implications of this move. To what extent does this mark another significant defeat for Iran and an opportunity for Turkey and also Saudi Arabia to cement their foothold in the region?
First of all, we also have to recognize that Ahmed al-Sharaa is maybe one of the very few regional actors that enjoy the support of traditional regional competitors. He is in good terms with Turkey as well as Qatar and Saudi Arabia. We haven't recently seen these three countries agreeing on one person. Maybe it is not the result of his good diplomacy or maybe it is a realization from the three countries that they need to coexist and to work together in Syria. It could be the case, but it is still a very rare occasion. Now, I believe that moving forward, it would be interesting to see how these three different actors will coexist in Syria. I mean, there is plenty for everyone to work on and to help the Syrian people, and also to have a stake in rebuilding and reconstructing the Syria. Which it comes, we have to be very open and honest with each other, with its own sway over the new government and state information. What Sharia would be in charge of is this balancing act, so he can maintain autonomy, and I think would be a new test for his ability to govern Syria.
All right, Omar, your thoughts. I mean, and what safeguards do you think, or conditions you believe that the international community should insist on to ensure that the economic benefits of lifting these sanctions actually reach the Syrian people?
Well, firstly, we can see that from the previous regime. The previous regime used to take the most of the aid, and you could see it on the pickup trucks of the intelligence services, and see it in the store being sold. So the previous regime was using it, was taking it and taking advantage of the aid. Today, there's not perfect transparency, but there is more transparency. There's more ability of reaching the people on the ground. There is more access for organizations and aid organizations as well as media than during the Assad regime. So today we can monitor things. We can follow up on question much more than we could do before. But it's very important to always keep in mind that it was in December that the Assad regime has, fell, and it's only months have passed, and it takes such a long time to build processes that are transparent and build process of accountability and so on. Which is important to consider, but at the same time, we have to follow up on every question that we think is concerning, and every partnership we establish. Would that be beneficial for the Syrian people? Would that serve us, as Syrians, or would that destroy our future and make it complicated for us to be part of the world? Because Syrians want to be part of the world, and we want to have peace. Because people are, of course, after years of conflict and death and suffering, people don't want that anymore. But also at the same time, people want to have dignity, and they want a government that can provide that dignity and doesn't step on it like the Assad regime did. So I'm hopeful, but I have some skepticism, and I keep it. But I'm looking at what's happening in Syria positively because I believe in my people.
Thank you. We will leave it on that hopeful note. Omar Al-Shogri, Joshua Landis, Sinan Hatahet, thank you so much for joining us for a very interesting conversation here on Inside Story. And thank you too for watching. You can always watch this program again anytime by visiting our website at aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. And of course, you can join the conversation on X. Our handle is at AJ Inside Story. From me, Fuli Batibo, and the whole team here in Doha, thanks for watching. Bye for now. Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.